My grandpa was an odd guy. He was clearly wealthy, but no one was ever really sure how. He lived frugally, in a house on a quarter of an acre with a, sensible car and nothing too fancy in the house. If you'd driven past it, you would have assumed some old-timer on a pension was just mouldering away his golden years there. And you would have been right in some ways. Where he showed his wealth was in his generosity. Grandpa liked to give. He gave the best Christmas presents, had all the best candy for Halloween, donated to charities. He liked to see people happy. If you asked him how he could afford to be so generous, however, he'd always just wink and say he had his way. Not even my grandmother knew where his money came from, and they were married for about 50 years. So when he died, we were all wondering just who was going to inherit his mysterious fortune. My cousins had loved Grandpa, grandkids always do, but the two of us, me and my grandpa, we'd always been close. My old man hadn't even waited till I was born to go grab some milk and cigarettes, if you know what I mean. Grandma and Grandpa had helped my mum raise me so she could go off to work and make money for us. I've got a lot of fond memories of sitting with my grandpa and just watching TV, taking walks around the neighbourhood, eating ice cream at this little shop on the corner. He'd always tell me to appreciate the little things, because the smallest thing could be the one that changes your life the most. Take this, he'd say, showing me the door knocker he often carried in his pocket. I found this when I was a very young man, sifting through trash in a landfill as I looked for bottles to sell. It became my lucky charm, and it changed my life forever. Grandpa carried that door knocker for as long as I knew him, and it was pretty unique. It was a brass hand holding an apple, and it was meticulously crafted in exhausting detail. The fingers all had individual nails, the apple had a stem and leaves, little bumps in it. Even the knuckles had wrinkles on them that had been carefully worked. I couldn't believe, as a young child at least, that Grandpa just pulled this out of a dump. But he carried it everywhere, and I suppose it did bring him some kind of luck. The funeral was beautiful. Everyone there having nothing but kind words for Grandpa and his family. After the service, my 3 cousins and I were asked to come to a will reading at the lawyer's office, and Grandpa had been as generous in death as he was in life. My cousins had received a trust fund for each of them, the amount payable on their 30th birthday, with a small living expense each month. Grandpa hadn't left a trust for me, but he had left me his little house, which I was pretty glad for. Mum had recently married, and though I liked the new guy a lot, it seemed a little weird to have her adult son living in the house she was trying to make a new life in with a new, romantic interest. Grandpa's old house was the perfect size for me. A college student with no real prospects of marriage in the near future. It was close enough to campus that I thought it would be ideal, but the lawyer had one more thing to give me. Your grandpa was also very clear that I give you this, he said, handing me Grandpa's lucky charm, the brass door knocker. I thanked him, thinking I might hang it somewhere in the house in Grandpa's memory. It seemed only fitting to make a little memorial wall out of it, and after all, Grandpa had loved the thing. It had been his only constant possession for years. So I moved in that day, taking my things and wishing my mum and stepdad goodbye as I too embarked on a new life. Over the next few days, I changed the house around a little. I hung my flat screen on the wall, moved Grandpa's favourite chair around, added my books to the bookshelf, and I donated his clothes and some of his other things to one of his favourite charities in town. I think Gramps would have liked the thought that his stuff would help people in need. They were all very thankful. A few of them offered condolences, having read about his death in the paper. Grandpa bought a lot of his stuff from Goodwill and Habitat for Humanity, but he also donated a lot, so he was well known to him. It was Friday, about 4 days after the funeral, when I noticed the knocker on the counter and remembered my plans to hang it and make a memorial wall. I didn't have anything else planned for the day, so it seemed like a fine pursuit. I hung the knocker in the living room, putting it above a little shelf where I put some candles and a picture of Grandad. I put his wallet up there too, something else he was never without. Added a tin of Altoids, a pocket watch I'd seen him wear, and a few other pictures of him. The door knocker was the centerpiece, and it all looked very nice when I got it done. As I finished, I stepped back and admired it, thinking that, you know what? Grandpa would have liked it too. Now that night was the first time I heard the knocking. I was laying in bed, doing some gross doom scrolling before I went to sleep like usual, when suddenly I heard a loud, brassy thump from the living room. I took out an earbud and listened, wondering if, something had fallen over. Maybe someone was at the door. But I didn't actually hear anything else. I shrugged, thinking, imagination? Or maybe pure laziness from sitting in bed? But just before I could slip my earbud back in, I heard it again. This time it was 3 booms from the living room, and then silence. I got up a little bit shaken, wondering who would be knocking on my door at this time of night. I went to the front door and looked out the peephole. I opened the door to see if someone was joking around, but there was no one there. Front porch was empty and there weren't any bushes or anything to hide behind. Whoever it was, the kid maybe? They'd have to be the Flash to make it off the porch without being seen. And I closed the door and started to go back to bed. I didn't make it far, just partway down the hallway when I heard it again. 3 long booms and then silence. I turned back to the door and something felt wrong. There wasn't anyone behind the door. The knocking didn't come from the door, I could tell. No, it had come from the living room. I glanced around looking for someone at the window, a book on the floor. I don't know, do woodpeckers make that kind of sound? But no, there was nothing. I decided to just go to bed and try to make sense of it later. Everything makes a bit more sense when daylight's around. As I'm sure you can tell if you're reading this, that wasn't the last time I heard it. Over that weekend I heard the knocking a couple of times, but I could never quite nail down where it was coming from. It was always either 1, 2, or 3 knocks, followed by a 10-second pause and then the same number of knocks before it stopped. By Monday I was pulling my hair out, wondering if it was the pipes or something in the walls. And then I finally caught it. I'd found a wedding picture of my grandparents sitting in a desk drawer. Something Grandpa had probably put away so he wouldn't miss her. And I decided it would look better on the shelf with his other memories. I was adding the wedding picture beside one of Grandpa's photos accepting an award for philanthropy when the knocker on the wall suddenly rattled and thumped. It's safe to say I pissed myself. I jumped back, not sure what to make of it, but there you go, it thumped once, twice, 3 times, and was quiet for about 10 seconds. I had just thought it might be a fluke, or I was dreaming or going crazy or something, when it happened again. Thump, 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 and then silence. I took it off the wall and inspected it, looking for some kind of motor or something, but nope. I already knew. It was just a normal brass knocker. It happened 2 more times that day, and I was extremely curious as to what made it do it and why. I started going through Grandpa's desk, hoping for some explanation, and that's when I found a letter. It was in the middle of a ledger book, addressed to me, wouldn't you know, and it wasn't even sealed, which was very unlike Gramps. It was just a single page of notebook paper, and I was pretty glad to see Grandpa's cramped handwriting speaking to me from the page. I hope you've enjoyed the house, and I hope you found this letter in a timely manner. I had considered leaving it to Wilson to give to you, but I thought it might be better if you came across it naturally. Also, I wanted you to receive the knocker, and Wilson may have decided to keep it if he'd read the letter. He's a good man, but greed can do funny things to people. You've probably noticed by now that the door knocker taps on its own sometimes. You wouldn't believe how I discovered its power. A complete accident. But I swear that what I'm about to tell you is absolutely true. The door knocker opens doors to different places. Place it on a door and wait for the knocks. Once it knocks, open the door and travel to where it takes you. The knocker only has 3 destinations, but they have been of great benefit to me and our family. When it knocks, you'll have 10 seconds to open the door. The second set of knocks is the doorway closing, so it won't work if you catch it on the second set. One knock opens into the treasury, a room full of treasures. Coins, gems, gold, all piled to the ceiling. If anything guards it, it's never bothered me, but I'm always careful not to take too much. 2 knocks opens onto a library, a room stuffed with bookshelves. You can spend hours, days even in this place, and time won't pass outside the door. I've learned so many things there. Things lost to time, and read about things that have yet to happen. 3 knocks opens onto a void, a darkness that I dare not enter. Anything you put in there will be gone. Anything. There is no ground, don't walk in. I'm ashamed to say that it's where I've been putting my trash, but it's also where I hid your beloved pet. The one I said ran away when you were very young. He died suddenly, lay over and passed, seemingly peacefully. I put him in there before I woke you from your nap. My beloved grandson, I'm sorry I never told you, but you were so young when it happened that I didn't think you would mourn him for long. The knocks are never consistent, but each knock seems to come at least once a day. The 3 knocks usually come in the evening or early afternoon. 1 knock is usually in the morning or before noon, and 2 knocks comes when it will. While you're inside, don't let the door close. I was stuck in the library for a long time once. It was fortunate that your uncle came along and opened it for me. Time doesn't affect people the same way inside the door, so spend as much time as you want there. If you get hurt, you will still be injured, so please, always be careful. You and I have always been close, and I know you and your cousins have speculated for years about my mysterious fortune. The knocker is yours to do with what you will, but always remember that money breeds difficulty, which is why I always kept it a secret. Good luck. I love you, kiddo. I read through the note a few times, trying to make sense of it. There was just no way. Grandpa had always been sharp. No real problems mentally, but this sounded like the mad ramblings of a lunatic. The knocker, however, had moved on its own. That much was true. It occurred to me that there was a way to test the rest of it, so I decided to do just that. I took the knocker off the wall where I'd had it hung up and attached it to the closet door in the living room. It looked a little silly there, a door knocker on a door that opened onto a closet with only, 2 coats and a bunch of board games in it. But hey, I wanted to be sure. It was silly, the kind of thing you read about in fairy tales, but I wanted to be sure. I had to wait a while, but it finally happened, just as I was thinking of going to bed. It was around 10:30 and I was reaching for the remote to turn the telly off when I finally heard it. 2 loud knocks, seconds apart, on the closet door. I popped up, remembering I had 10 seconds to get there, and threw the door open. Silly me, I expected to find the same closet that had been there earlier. I expected this to be a joke from my grandfather. What I didn't expect was to find a great library. The great library that he'd been talked about. It was huge. A library to rival any I'd seen. And the windows shone with perfect sunlight as I stood in shock. The shelves were tall, taller than the roof of the house I stood in. And they had long trestled ladders with wheels to slide along the floor. I could see a grand staircase and I felt sure there would be levels above the next as well. I could learn anything in here. I could learn everything in there. But I remembered what Grandpa had said about not getting closed in and looked for something to prop the door open with. I saw an end table and pulled it over to put in the way, stepping inside and simply marveling at the space. I spent hours perusing books. There were books on languages, on history, on science, on anything I would want to know. I only explored part of the first floor that night, but there was enough there to keep me reading for days, maybe months. I was studying architecture in college, and there was a whole section of books I could use to study any period, any style, and anything else that I wanted. This place was like the library they talked about in Alexandria, the library in the Harry Potter books, and some kind of wizard's private collection from a fantasy novel, all rolled into one. Time may have moved differently in here, but it didn't stop me from getting tired. I had been excited when I came in, but after a couple of hours of looking at books, I was yawning and rubbing my eyes. I decided to come back another time and let the door close as I pushed the end table out of the way. It was true. I couldn't believe it, but hey, I'd seen it myself. Grandpa had a magic door knocker. I had a magic door knocker. I spent the next few days and even weeks testing each knock pattern, and Grandpa's observations had always been spot on. I found the room with the gold in it the next day, and it was almost more impressive than the library. Think of a room full of any kind of money you could want. Gold bars, US currency, ancient denarii, little things like stones with things scratched on them, gems, pearls, silver nuggets, and other things I didn't even have names for. I reached for a stack of hundreds with shaky hands and brought them out before letting the door close again. I'd made about $2,000 in a matter of seconds, and I put it somewhere safe before heading to class. The void was a little scarier when I got it, but I'd been setting garbage bags beside the door just in case I was home when the knock came. The void was just what it claimed to be. It was like looking out at the night sky, except there were no stars. It was an inky, unnatural, deep blackness. And in a rare philosophical moment, I thought of maybe Nietzsche had been describing this place when he talked about staring into the abyss. This space was utterly devoid of anything, but it seemed to crouch as well, just waiting for me to drop my guard. The bags went in, falling into a soundless, airless void before I closed the door again. It was great for a while. Truly a blessing. I had all the money I needed, and whatever I took, it seemed to come back after I shut the door. I could take books from the library if I needed, and anything I left on the work tables would put itself back on the shelf. I spent a lot of time in the library when I could get there, and sometimes I would wake up to find I'd fallen asleep. The door never slammed shut and trapped me in there, and without anyone to come behind me and accidentally close it, I felt safe in there. I learned so much in a relatively short time, and my professors were impressed with my knowledge. I considered bringing them the books I used to gain this knowledge, but thought better of it. How would I explain it to them? Where would I say I got them from? I'm just a guy in his early 20s who just happened to have a book that was probably hundreds of years old. That was something that would probably gain the attention of the wrong sort of people. I was careful not to use too much of the money, careful not to spread it around too much, and careful not to show anyone the books from the library. It went well for about 4 months, but then I started getting knocks of another sort on the door. It started very subtly. Little knocks and taps from time to time. I'm sure I missed a lot of them, but I would sometimes look up if I was watching TV or something, expecting to see the knocker tapping, but finding it motionless. I started watching the door closer, seeing strange lights waft beneath it sometimes. They would skitter across the bottom like strange shadows, and I found myself watching them more on the TV after a while. My trips to the other places were still uneventful, the landscapes the same as they had always been, but it was the times in between the knocks that I came to dread. Then, one night, something knocked back. I was brushing my teeth when I heard a familiar boom sound 3 times. I checked the clock and saw it was nearly 11. A little late for knocking, but I stuck my head out to look at the door nonetheless. The toothbrush was still half in my mouth, and I expected to see nothing stranger than the knocker fall back into place. Instead, something knocked again. And it wasn't the knocker. I came slowly out the bathroom, watching as strange lights came flashing from between the cracks in the door. It was like a haunted house attraction, and I almost expected to see smoke billowing out from underneath it. The knocks were shy, almost uncertain, and I was preparing to head to my room when something hit the door hard. Hard enough to shake it in its frame. Safe to say I jumped back, not sure what to make of it. And when it hit again, I fell onto my ass and just watched it shake. Whatever was knocking was adamant about getting in, and it slammed its weight into the door again and again. The knob rattled, the door shook, and the lights flashed faster and angrier. My teeth were chattering. This had never happened before, and I was terrified that whatever it might be, it might get through. It slammed into it again, the old wooden door cracking in the frame. I could see the actual wood bending, and when it struck this time, I saw something break through the surface and come grabbing blindly from within. It was an arm, a long purple arm covered in scales. It thrashed around violently. It was feral, trying to find something to grab. and the sounds from within were like bats and birds turned up to 1,000. It shivered right on the edge of hearing, and I expected my ears to start bleeding. It was so disgustingly loud. It was looking for the knob. And you know what? I wasn't sure what would happen if I found it. Instead, it bumped into the knocker. Lucky for me, it fell off the door. It was only held on by a couple of screws, and as it clattered onto the floor, the most hellish sound of all ripped from the hole before being cut off as suddenly as it had begun. The lights, the noise, and the banging all stopped with a suddenness that made me almost dizzy. I stood up, looking at the broken door, and walked slowly into the living room to see the extent of the damage. Something was bumping, but I thought maybe the arm had knocked something over. I wanted to make sure the knocker was okay, but as I came around Grandpa's old chair, I saw what was making all the noise. It was the arm. The arm that had come through the door, leaking black, oozy liquid all over the hardwood floor and flopping around like a fish, scratching and scrabbling around trying to find purchase. It didn't flop around for long, but now I'm left with a problem. The portal only seems to open when the knocker's up, but unless it's up, I can't open it. I wonder if this is why Grandpa kept it with him so often. Did he maybe have a visitor one night when he least expected it? For now, I'm keeping the knocker on my bedside table. But even as I lay here writing this, I can hear it bump against the wood every now and then. The money will eventually run out. That, or my curiosity will learn to get the better of me, and I'll hang the knocker again. But I think, for now, I'll let it sit. No need to invite trouble if I don't need to, right? My inheritance had some strange rules.